Hello. In this video, we're going to go through the program that we wrote in class that kind of helped give an idea about how to do a couple things in preparation for your first programming assignment. You can find a copy of this code in your OneNote binder, and if you are someone that is not in my class that is watching this, lots of little good tidbits in here, and feel free to ask me questions if you're interested. I'm happy to support anyone that's interested. So let's dive in, shall we? So this program here, if we run it, it says, "Welcome to Mr. Miskew's demo program." And then notice right away, the text is actually, it's not all coming out in one stream. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about in this program is we've included something called a pause method. The way the program works is the point system actually generates a health bar. So we generate this health bar and it says, question 1, what is Mr. Miskew's favorite movie? And my favorite movie is Back to the Future, so if I put A, gives me some sort of prompt so I know we've gotten the correct answer, and then it prints out my health bar again so I know where my health is. So then it says, what is the name of the worst enemy in Star Trek? And we could say, for example, our answer could be, I don't know, Cardassians. I don't know if I spelt that right, but that's wrong. So what you see is I've lost 2 health, so my health bar has gone down by 2. So at the start I had 10, now I have 2. So let's take a look at the code and see if we can highlight a couple interesting points here. So one thing I want to say before I dive into this is, yes, this is a text-based game. The purpose of this is not necessarily to impress with flash and graphics and all these different things, but it's really to make sure that we understand the core elements that we've learned so far. And that is conditional statements, such as if statements, and loop structures. Some students have been experimenting with string methods, and I think everyone should try and use some built-in string methods in this program. And some people have been experimenting with methods. And though we haven't actually studied methods yet, it's well worth your effort to try and incorporate one. So I'm happy to chat with you and show you some neat little techniques to do that. So at the start of this program, we have our scanner object we create, and then we create our variables. Now, one thing that's important for programmers to do is to comment. This is especially important for beginning programmers because it helps you understand how your program runs. So these are my variables, so I'm going to write that there, variables. I can actually comment each variable, so this stores the health of the player. This takes character inputs for the game. This takes string inputs for the game. Now it's very clear what these variables do. Now what I have is this is an introduction section. Okay, so what it does is it prints out system.println welcome to Mr. Miskew's demo program, and then you see this line here, pause 1000. So this is a built-in method in Java that I've written called pause. So what it is this is a method I've written. Pardon me, I said built-in method, but this is a method I've written in Java. So as we know, this is our main method, and when we run a program, it always starts at the main method. So if we look at the main method, we see that it's inside of the health bar class. So if I scroll down to the very end of the main, which is down here, and I can actually add a comment and main to help, you'll see that I've written another method. For now, methods always start with the word public static. We'll explore why that is a little later. This is the return type, so this is what it spits out. Now my pause method doesn't actually spit anything out. It doesn't give anything back to process. It simply just pauses the computer. So void means nothing is given back. Here's the name, and this is the parameter. The parameter is a single integer. So then there's some code in here which we're not too interested in, but essentially I'll tell you that this code pauses the game for a milliseconds. So what you'll see here is up here it says pause 1000, and what that does is the program here, it sees this word pause and it says, oh, I know what this is a method, and the program jumps all the way down to here, runs this code, making a 1000, and then when it's done and pause, it goes all the way back up here and then continues on and then prints the next line and then pauses and then prints the next line and then pauses. So a method is a useful little chunk of code that you can call on, and as opposed to writing the pause method, the pause code every time in each case here, I just write it in one little spot and I can tell the computer to go there and execute it. So the way this works is I've decided for my game and my design is that I'm going to have a health bar. So you'll notice here I've clearly commented code for health bar. So this is the code for your health bar. So we print out health. So this prints out the word health, and notice it's just print, not print line. And then I use a for loop. So again, a for loop, remember, is a loop that's used when we know how many times something needs to occur. So in my case, I want to print out a star, an asterisk for every health point I have. So that means I know how many times this has to happen. And a for loop is broken up like this. So we always have the word for, and the first part of it is the counter variable. And this is where we initialize the start point. Initialize start. The next thing is the check. So this is the check that happens every time. And the last part is the change. This is the change that occurs at the end of the loop. And then we open a brace, and then inside the braces is the code block for the loop, and then we close the brace. So in this case, I have an integer called I, which is my counter, and it's initialized to 0. My check is that I is less than health, and my change is I increase I by 1 each time. So if we kind of walk through this code, and again, something I stress when you're learning to program, and even programmers that know what they're doing do this, get something and point at the screen. So you can't see me doing this, but I'm actually going to point at this, and I'm going to say to myself, 4. Okay, so I becomes 0, and then I'll say, is 0 less than health? And I know my health variable at this point is 10. So is 0 less than health? True. So it comes in here, and it prints out a star, and then it gets to the end of the for block. And we can put here end for. So when it gets to the end of the for block, then what it does is it increases I by 1. So it applies the change. So I goes from 0 to 1. And now we say, is 1 less than 10? And the answer is yes, or true. So we print it out again. And then it continues to do this over and over again. So we can say counter, check, change. Those are the 3 components that you need for a for loop. And you can do all sorts of interesting stuff with this, which we'll explore in some later videos. So notice here I've started my health code block, and this is the end of my code for the health bar. And then I asked the first question. And I've used some escape codes here, \n to give some space. And again, we want to space these out so they look nice. Part of the programming experience is thinking about what the user is experiencing, making sure it looks nice, reads well. So we want to be aware of things like grammar, proper punctuation, all these different things. So we say, what is Mr. Miskew's favorite movie? And we give our options, and then we take an input. And remember, you must prompt the user. Often what students do in this is they won't put this line here. And so all the user will see is a flashing cursor. Here, I'll show you. Let me run this now. So I run this. Pull this up, and it's running. So it's going through. And now notice here, there's nothing telling me what has to happen. So as the programmer, I know this is waiting for an input. But the user is going to scratch their head here and get a little frustrated. We always want to think about the user experience. So it's much better when you want an input to always prompt the user so the user knows what they need to do. And we'll just run it again here and take a look. And there we go. So input answer. Now it's very clear what I have to do. So let's pull this down a bit. So what I've done now is I've put some logic here to associate with the first question. So I said if the input is equivalent, remember 2 equal signs means equivalent, capital A, or input is equivalent to small a, we print out correct. And what I've done here is I've added a little else if, because if you happen to pick that my favorite movie is the new Star Trek film, I want to make it perfectly clear that I don't like it. I'm all about Star Trek The Next Generation. And I'm happy to have a further discussion about that if you're interested. So if you happen to pick the new Star Trek film, I actually subtract 5 health. So you lose 5 of your health points. But any other choice, you lose 2 health points. Remember, you want to always have some sort of feedback for the user so they know what's happened. So you have to always have some sort of feedback happening. And then, of course, we print out our health bar again right here. There's my health bar being printed out. And then I ask question 2. So notice question 2, the difference is that now it's looking for a string answer, so it's looking for a word. So what I've done is I've taken this word, and often, let me just comment this line out, often what students do is they do this, and not just students, a lot of programmers do this without thinking. They say to themselves, okay, well, is guess equivalent to the Borg? And the computer doesn't catch this as an error, but this is actually problematic. Remember, strings are what are called reference variables. Strings are reference variables. And what that means is that when we compare the string variable using this technique, we're not actually comparing the word stored there. We're comparing the memory reference. Now, for our purposes, that technicality isn't that important, but it's really important to understand that you can't compare strings like this. You can only compare primitive types using this comparing method, or this comparing technique. So what we need to do is to use a built-in method. So I'm going to say guess, and notice if I put guess and I hit dot, it has all these methods here. One is called equals ignore case. Borg, and it's true. Quick little point when you're using these methods, make sure you look, oh, pardon me, let me get this back here. So we come down here, we see equals ignore case. Scroll down, equals ignore case. We always want to make special note of what it takes. So we see it takes a string as a parameter, and what does it spit out? It spits out a Boolean for us to look at. And always take a second and read the description. You're not always going to understand them, but always reading this helps develop your understanding. And always ask questions if you don't get something. So we come back here, we know that it returns a Boolean, so we see it's true. And of course, then you get it correct. Otherwise, it says you're incorrect and you lose 2 health, and it prints out your health bar again. So this is my little program. Lots of little ideas here. I'm going to do one thing before I kind of wrap up. Notice in this game, there's going to be more questions here. So I'm going to have to use this chunk of code to print the health bar a whole bunch of times right here. So since this code is repeated a number of times, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and put it into a method. Now again, you don't have to actually write methods yet, but it's always interesting to try and extend our skills. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it out. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to cut. Now I'm going to come down here to the end of the main, and I'm going to make a new method. So methods for now always start with the word public static. So then I ask myself, does this method give anything back to be processed? Does it give me a number or something like that? And the answer is no. It simply just prints stuff to the screen. I'm going to put the word void. And now what do I want to call this method? Let's call this method print health. And then I ask myself, what does this method need? Well, it'd be good if I gave this method how much health you have. So we're going to call this int a. Now I open a brace, and this is the end of the method. So now I paste this in here. So a couple things that need to happen now is notice the variable health is no longer here. So let's take these comments out there. So instead of going from I is less than health, see how it doesn't know about that variable anymore? That's because it's up in the main. I want to go I is less than A. So what I can do now, the really nice thing about this, is any time that I see this code for printing out the health bar, I can get rid of it now in my program. And I can simply write in the word print health, and I'm going to give it the health variable. So just with this one line now, it's going to jump to here, put whatever the health is in for A, execute this code, and then go back to that point. So that means if I come up here, this is somewhere where I print the health bar, so I can paste that there, and I'm going to come up a little bit more. I think there's one more spot. Oh, I think here is where I printed the health at the start. And so now if I run this, it's had no change in the actual program. So what is Mr. Miskew's favorite movie? I'm going to say, let's put Army of Darkness. It's a good film still. And it still prints my health bar just like before, but what's happened now is I've reduced the amount of code. So it's worth trying. If you're still struggling with some of the core ideas, You don't need to put methods in, but it's something nice to always try. And let's say the worst enemy in Star Trek is the Borg, and I get that correct. So, and there's my health. Anyways, lots of great ideas here. I hope this video helped. And as always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask me, even if you're not my student. Have a great day.